this connection between the faith communities and co-ops in Central America, the church has had a fascinating history of running what we call underground railroads. During the Civil War, churches, were the places that slaves were brought north. They hid in churches. And also during the war in El Salvador, it was a movement where refugees out of El Salvador would cross the border and churches would offer sanctuary. This particular movement, the fair trade movement, started also with the churches to create an alternative economy to the one that was oppressing small farmers. And it's a part of the church's work, part of the faith community's work that a lot of people don't know about. In fact, I want to honor Sarah. We had a little, in our worship time in the mid-semester, and I mentioned this in the newsletter, the text was about awakening. And I asked the group gathered there, what they had awakened to in terms of the last year hanging around our community, La Florian. And Sarah said, in the darkness, we were on some candles, and she said, I didn't know that the faith community was involved in justice issues. And I said, well, she said, I learned that here. And I said, well, had you heard that before? And she said, not really. And now, it doesn't mean it wasn't being told or said, it's just that she was not ready to hear that. But on the other hand, most of our churches up here are weak when it comes to justice. We're pretty good at compassion, not good at justice. But there's a wonderful Jewish saying that the universe is held up. God holds up the universe with two pillars. One is compassion. We all know that. But the other one is justice.
Just going to give you kind of a little overview of our trip and then tell some cool stories that we brought back with us. And Lisa's created this lovely PowerPoint to show us a bunch of pictures that we've taken, or that she took with her really good camera.
Basically all week we saw the coffee process, not necessarily in order, but we visited I think 5 farms and 4 or 5, and the dry mills and wet mills and all the different process. But we actually got to pick these are the coffee cherries in the first co-op we went to, and we picked for an hour and got 30 pounds, and there were 14 of us, and the average coffee picker there can pick 100 pounds in an hour.
Working on our skills.
Yeah, our skills are not. And so they have this basket, and they put it around their waist with a strap and just pick, and they all fall in. They start from the bottom and work up on the plant and then move down the row.
They're pretty tall plants. What are they, probably about 6, 7 feet tall.
Some of them get really tall, so you have to bend them over and take them off. And there's also little stems that you're not supposed to pull off because it stunts the next year's growth. And
we were pretty good at that.
Yeah, we're not very good.
Sorry.
And then this is up in the mountains, and then they carry the 100-pound bags back down on their shoulders like this all day.
And some of the people had horses, I think, that they would bring from home, and they would rig up little wooden holders on there, but most of the people were carrying them down right on the back of their neck.
And then most of the farms were either had or were getting a wet mill, so that more of the processing could be done there, and it would be cheaper to send just to the dry mill, then to a wet mill, and then a dry mill, and then shipping. And so this is the beginning of the wet milling process, which takes the cherry off of the actual the coffee bean. And they ferment it for 16 hours in a huge vat, and then it goes through this whole system where it peels off the cherry part.
And the cherries of the coffee beans, we got to bite them and try them because they said they were sweet on the inside, so the water is really sweet, and I guess it kind of pollutes things if you just let it all go in one spot, so they have to spray it or disperse it using buckets around so they're not killing all the plant life.
And this was a trough that they were all running off in, and they kept the remains of the cherries in a big pile and let them
just kind of compost,
and then farmers will use it as fertilizer for coffee plants. And then this is after the cherries have been removed, and they have them sit out in the sun for, it depends how sunny it is, but like anywhere from 5 to 8 hours. And that's just to get a lot of the wetness off, because you saw the amount of water that was going through them. And when they send it to the dry mill, they can't have it too wet, because in the transferring from their farms to the dry mill, which could take half a day to get there, there could be like rotting or if there's too much water. So they let it sit out in the sun and in those grates, and they also do some like quality control at that point, I guess you could call it. They pick out cherry remains that remain on the beans and any other like beans that are affected by what
like
they call
bugs.
them there,
They're like
yeah,
boring insects.
I think they call them just boring insects here. And this is the dry mill. Basically, they just have a huge plot of flat land. This is through Seco Cafen, which is a cooperative of cooperatives, which we'll get to later, the cooperative and fair trade aspect. But so basically, farmers from all over this area come in. They bring however much they have. They're all small farmers, so it's not like huge semis full of coffee. It's just basically the backs of pickup trucks, and they unload it and they label it in these fields so that the farmer knows where it is and they know which farmer has it, because they do quality control later and cupping to give feedback to the farmers on how their coffee tastes and what they can do to make it better. And basically they spread it out, and again, depending on how sunny it is and the conditions, these women rake the fields all day basically in the hot sun, and they wear like bandanas and hats because it's so incredibly warm, and they rake through them so that it's evenly dried. This man was in charge of like the whole field area of knowing and testing when they were dry enough and how long they had to go. And he would, to test it, he takes the parchment layer of the coffee bean off with his hands just to test it and see how moist it is under that. And they look like that when you take the parchment off.
And this was just like for testing purposes. They have a machine that does it when they take the whole load of coffee into the warehouse.
And that's after deparchment, and they had a huge warehouse, and they take it all there and put it through these machines. And they had actually just gotten a conveyor belt and a machine that sorts the coffee beans by color. And they said at the conveyor belt they'll have 5 women on each side, and they pick out the bad coffee beans, like mad women.
So it's pretty intense.
It's pretty intense, yeah. And there's some coffee ready to go. And then they had a cupping lab there at Seco Cafen and also at Sepexo, which is another co-op of co-ops. And basically what this does, it tests for first aroma of just the dry ground coffee. It's actually a very like prestigious position to be a cupper. Actually, the first cupping place we went to, this was here, he was like the second best cupper in Nicaragua. They have like competitions and everything. It's really intense actually.
Yeah.
And we got to try it out, but first they grind them and test for aroma. Then they add hot water and test for aroma again, and there's a section they mark, and there's a whole point system for aroma, flavor, body, acidity, and then the whole, I don't know what they call it, balance. And they slurp the coffee on a spoon and then spit it out, and Sarah goes, "Why do you spit it back out?" And he goes,
That makes sense.
At this point, are the beans roasted?
Yeah, they roast them first.
Same warehouse where they were taking the parchment off them with the machinery, they also had a roasting machine.
For the cupping, they roast it at medium roast, because if you roast it at a darker roast, sometimes it covers up the imperfections, and so they roast it at medium so that they can taste every.
How do you get all those flavors like cognac and all these different things? How does that happen?
Well,
Just where the region where the coffee comes from,
a lot of
mainly
it is
in
region.
how
And
they
then
roast
also,
it.
a good part of having the cupping there, right in Nicaragua, so the farmers, first of all, so the farmers know what they're growing and how it's coming out. And second of all, when customers call, they can ask for a specific type of coffee. They want this acidity, this body, this flavor, and they can match it up. And they do mixing too, so if they don't have that specific one, they can take one farmer's and mix it with another's, and then it'll come out to the right acidity and everything. So.
Oh yeah, basically what it was, they had a whole computer filing system of like different coffee profiles, and people can just call up and let them know what they need, so it's pretty good.
What influences, what changes that? Is it the soil?
There's a lot.
Yeah.
Soil, elevation.
If it was shade grown or if it was grown out in a
Also,
field.
even things that are going next to it or among it, because in the shade grown, it's shaded by other plants, a lot of banana trees, but it depends even what fruit you grow by it, or it's a lot can affect
the water
it.
make a difference?
Yeah, basically everything ties into it.